So, I previously put out a list of my top 10 favourite Nintendo Switch 2 games, a list which was slightly controversial for some, but surely that's what these types of lists are for. No one is right, everyone has their own opinions, and the fun is discussing them afterwards, justifying our thoughts and tastes, and the real list was the friends we make along the way. I also made a list of my top 10 games that I'm most looking forward to, but given that both lists were made at quite an early stage and we've had some huge releases and announcements since then, I've been meaning to revisit these lists and update them with my current thoughts. And being that tomorrow we are being treated to a Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase, now seems like the exact time to revisit the top 10 games already released, before revisiting the top 10 most wanted after the Direct when we've had more announcements. So, this episode is updating my top 10 favourite games, sure, but we do have a lot to consider. We've had some major releases since then. We have a Japanese exclusive launch title that I missed the first time round when reviewing every launch title, in inverted commas, every, meaning that if you follow my running joke of the Welcome Tour not counting as a real game, then Nintendo weren't actually lying when they said there were 25 games. It's just that the 25th was Japanese only, but it gives me something fun to talk about in this episode, a game which flew under most people's radars. We've had some pretty big games that I've already reviewed, Raidou Remastered, WWE 2K25, and some big games I've not reviewed yet, Shadow Labyrinth, Super Mario Party Jamboree TV, and it gives me an excuse to talk about them, maybe do a little mini review to tide us over. And, of course, we have the big one, Donkey Kong Bananza, banana, a game I've already made a preliminary review for, and said that there is a good chance it could become crowned my favourite game of all time. But I have been suspiciously silent on it ever since. Have I been disappointed? Was it all hype and no trousers? Quite literally, with the costume customization, though I currently have him in some fetching dungarees. Cue the Top of the Pops music that only people from the UK and select other European countries from a certain time period will know, and others will wonder why I'm singing Whole Lotta Love, and we can start the show. It's the cream of the crop, my Top of the Pops, a valid excuse for me to put Alizé in the thumbnail again as we run down my top 10 games for the Nintendo Switch 2. Will Donkey Kong be the top banana, or should that be Bananza? Like a monkey in a ball, let's get ready to banana rumble. Your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, everyone's got to be a Nintendo lover. Watch me wreck the mic, watch me wreck the mic, watch me wreck the mic. Psych. For the 1 month anniversary, in inverted commas, of both the Switch 2 and therefore my channel, I did a special episode where I tried to counteract all the negativity surrounding keycards, poor software sales, price increases and the like at the time, and only talk about positive things. It's one of my favourite episodes because I prefer talking about things that make me happy rather than things that make me angry or sad. But in typical YouTube fashion, positivity doesn't get as many clicks as outrage and scandal, so it's actually my worst performing episode. I'd love it if you'd go check it out and give it a boost in the algorithm. I'll link to it in the description and pinned comment. But part of the episode was me talking about my top 10 favourite games on the Switch 2 so far at the time. But at that time of recording, Donkey Kong Bananza hadn't been released. In fact, I also did a top 10 most anticipated games, and obviously Bananza was, of course, number 1. So, did it live up to my hype? And with multiple new games having released in the meantime, and me playing a few more of the launch games a bit more since then to gain a more rounded opinion, have my feelings changed? Will WWE get a tournament belt? Could Jamboree make the cut? What about Namco's new Shadow Labyrinth? A Pac-Man-inspired Metroidvania? Will I gobble its cherries or completely ghost it? Will Bananza be the king of the jungle? Spoilers, it's probably yes, isn't it? But find out after I just quickly read the podcast intro. And if you skip these intros, please do me a favour and at least drop a like while you're doing so. It really makes a difference. Thank you. Hi everyone, welcome to Daily Switch 2, a podcast covering everything related to the Nintendo Switch 2 with at least one new episode or video uploaded per day to YouTube, Spotify and your favourite major platforms. My name is Sam, I've been a gamer since the 1980s, I've worked in the entertainment industry since I was a teenager, including as a games journalist, producer of gaming documentaries and shows, And I'm even programming multiple indie video games, including 4, which will be released on the Switch and hopefully Switch 2. So be sure to subscribe and follow the show for the world-exclusive news on those as they drop. However, I'm a gamer and a Nintendo fan at heart, and this podcast is purely a passion project for me to talk about the stuff that interests and excites me about this new system. It's not monetized or funded by any entity. It's completely unofficial and unbiased so that I can give my full, frank, honest opinions. So if you want to support me or just find out the best places to get these free daily episodes, or to join our free members area where you can talk to me and leave suggestions and take part in monthly free giveaways to win official Nintendo prizes, all links are in the bio and at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Thank you so much. And back to the episode. Right, so to the top 10. Because many of you didn't listen to the positive episode, I don't blame you, I'm blaming the algorithm. I think it makes sense to insert a clip here of the previous list so we can come back and discuss afterwards. I hope that's okay. I promise I won't make a habit of reusing clips in full episodes. I just really feel that it makes sense here, given the fact that we are discussing something from an episode that got buried before. If you did already listen and want to skip, as always, timestamps are in the description and pinned comment. So, to be clear, this is my previous top 10 and honourable mentions as of around 2 weeks ago. So yeah, the game's the most important thing, and maybe then we should go straight into my top 10 favourite games for the Nintendo Switch 2 so far, yes? I mean, honourable mentions, I suppose. I'm not going to include Mario Kart in my top 10. I've made many videos on Mario Kart, and I did mention in all of those videos that I do think it's a quality product, and there are really good things about it, and I can see why people would really enjoy it. It's just there's certain things about it that frustrate me. I am autistic, and the things that frustrate me about the game actually frustrate me so much that I find it difficult to play, and with the updates that they've done recently, it's actually made it slightly worse. But I can absolutely understand that to other people, those issues won't bother them at all, and they will really enjoy the game and have fun with it. And this is a positive episode, so I don't want to be overly negative about the game. So I'm going to give it an honourable mention and say if it's your type of thing, and if the little niggles with it won't bother you, yeah, obviously Mario Kart's a great game, obviously. But it's just not going to be in my top 10. Yakuza, Hitman, Deltarune, these are all games which I'm 100% certain are quality experiences. I have played previous games in the series. I've played other Yakuza games. I've played the early Hitman games, and obviously I've played Undertale. But I've not actually played Yakuza 0, the Hitman Collection, or any of the episodes or chapters of Deltarune. So I can't give an opinion on them, but I'm sure they're really good. But because I've not played them, obviously they're not going to be in my top 10. And similarly, there's plenty of RPGs that have released, which I'm sure are quality titles, but I've either not played them or I've not had enough time to really get into them. I'm thinking Raidou, I'm going to talk about in another video. That's clearly a quality experience, but I've only played like the first hour of it to give it a try. Bravely Default, Kunitsugami, and Survival Kids. I'm still intrigued about Survival Kids from Konami. Let me know in the comments if you've played Survival Kids. Is it good? Should I give it a chance? It doesn't really look like my kind of thing, but it was one of the only exclusive titles on the system, so I am intrigued, and I know that it had previous games on the Game Boy Color and Nintendo DS. So if it's a long-running series, you know, it's probably a quality product. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. But that's honourable mentions. I'm not going to be including RPGs that I haven't played enough, but that to be able to give a full opinion on. But that doesn't mean that they're not good games. So let's get into my top 10. Top 10. Number 10, I'm going to give it to Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, to some people, they'll say, well, why isn't that in the top 3? And Breath of the Wild should be there as well. I'm not going to include Breath of the Wild, but I'm going to talk about it here with Tears of the Kingdom. Obviously, they're both excellent games. It's just that to me, they are Switch 1 games. They run better on the Switch 2. If you've never played them before, you should absolutely play them on the Switch 2. And actually, if you've never played either of them before, you should probably start with Breath of the Wild first. But I do feel that for people who have played them before, Tears of the Kingdom is probably the game with the more replay value or variety, just because of how much flexibility there is with the systems. And also, if you're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 edition, Tears of the Kingdom is complete, whereas the Breath of the Wild doesn't come with the DLC and you have to buy it separately. So yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, obviously quality game, and both Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild do play the best on Switch 2, and the extra little features you have with the application and the map, and it's just, yeah, it's a great experience. But it's an experience that most of us have already played, tens or hundreds of hours playing on the Switch 1. So that's why it's not further up in the top 10. Number 9, I'm going to give it to Tamagotchi Plaza. I'm sure some of you have heard my review of Tamagotchi Plaza. If you haven't, I'd recommend going and giving it a listen, because you might think you're not interested in Tamagotchi, especially when you hear that it's a kid's game, or when some people describe it as a mini game compilation. That's going to make you think you're not interested. It's actually a very interesting game. It's a quality product. It's far more in depth and has far more variety than your typical kind of mini game experience. It's a brilliant game if you are playing as a family together. If you have little kids and you're going to play, I use the example of saying it's a bit like watching Bluey with your kids, in the sense that you as a parent are going to have fun watching it as well, rather than something like Cocomelon, which the kids might love, but you as a parent are going to be hitting your head against a brick wall going, I need to get out of here, I can't watch this. That's kind of how I feel with Tamagotchi Plaza. If you were playing it together as a family, the parents would have a good time. But also, part of the reason I've also included it here is because Bandai Namco are one of only 3 third-party companies so far that have released a fully physical game. You can buy a fully physical version of this on a cartridge. There's no game key cards. There's no, digital download codes and DLCs and everything like that. No, it's on the cartridge. You plug it in, it works, and it's a quality product. And it's $50 as opposed to $70 or $80, which is the price of every single other physical game so far. So it's the cheapest physical game so far, and it is a quality product, and it uses the Switch 2 hardware in interesting ways, like mouse mode and the IR sensors and things as well. So yeah, it's a quality little game, but it is, a simple game. It's a kids game, so obviously that's why it's only at number 9. Number 8, I'm going to give it to Arcade Archives 2 Ridge Racer. Obviously, this is an emulated port of the early to mid-90s, I think 1993 arcade game Ridge Racer. And if you've listened to my previous episode talking about the launch games, you'll know that I am an enormous fan of the Ridge Racer series. And this first game, my opinion on it is, it's basically, even though it's a very small game, there's really kind of only one track, depending on how you look at it. For me, there's pretty much infinite replay value with playing it over and over and over and over and over again, and trying to beat your lap times and trying to improve. I have been playing Ridge Racer since 1993, and I still play it regularly to this day. I'm not bored of it. And this port for the Switch 2, it runs flawlessly. It's excellent. It's not a port of the PlayStation version. It's the actual arcade version, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So if you're the type of person that really likes arcade style racing and time trial games, then yes, I can 100% recommend this. The only weird thing is, if you already bought it on the Switch 1, your Switch 1 download is not compatible with the Switch 2, and at the moment you have to pay full price for it again. The full price is fairly reasonable. I think, if I remember, it's $17. But it does say on the website that they are looking to bring a solution in the future. So at some point in the future, you will be able to download the upgrade either for free or for a smaller price. My number 7 choice of my favorite games so far released is Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S. This is an absolutely fantastic game. There is a but Again, I put out a entire episode reviewing this game and going into a deep dive on the history of Tetris and the history of Puyo Puyo and the Puyo Puyo Tetris series. Basically, this is an absolutely excellent game. The only issue is if you buy the Switch 1 version, it's going to be cheaper, it's going to have more players online, and the full game on the cartridge, whereas this is a game key card. That's not entirely Sega's fault, but we've got into that before. What is Sega's fault, though, is they don't offer an upgrade path, and they don't allow Switch 1 players and Switch 2 players to play against each other in multiplayer, which is crazy. But if you're just talking about Switch 2 games and you want to collect only Switch 2 games, can I recommend it? Yes, unequivocally I can recommend it. It is an excellent game. I have played countless hours playing Puyo Puyo Tetris 1 and 2, and 2X adds some extra features, and it is the best version as long as you don't care about playing online. Number 6, No Man's Sky, Nintendo Switch 2 edition. Again, I put out a small video on this, not a full review, but a kind of 6-7 minute clip talking about my opinions on No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky is an excellent game, and although I haven't personally played the Switch 2 version, I have had multiple comments from people saying that they play it on their Switch 2 and it is an excellent version, so I've no reason to doubt that, and I can 100% recommend No Man's Sky. It's an excellent game with near unlimited playability. You know, it's one of those games of if it was the only game that you owned, you would be okay. you could still get enjoyment out of it, and you probably wouldn't get bored if you're the type of person who enjoys that kind of style of gameplay loop of exploring space, discovering. I'm sure most of you know what No Man's Sky is, but if you don't, yeah, go check out my my previous little video on it. Number 5, I'm going to give it to Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma. And do you know what? I've only played it a little bit so far, but from what I've played so far, absolutely it deserves to be here, and as I play it more, it might actually raise up even higher than number 5. But for now, I'm placing it at number 5. It is an excellent game. I know I said I wasn't going to cover too many RPGs, but this is kind of like a hybrid RPG with kind of farming and life simulator elements, and it's just an dating sim elements, and it's a really cool kind of melange of styles, and I wasn't originally going to get into it, but then I praised it because it was one of the tiny handful of games which actually come with the full physical game on the cartridge, and I believe also, if you're not in Europe, it does come with a manual in the box as well, which is really nice, because again, even Nintendo aren't putting manuals in their boxes nowadays. And as I've covered in previous episodes, I want to support Marvelous, the publishers. I really like their ethos. I really like what they're doing. But then I have had countless people, like many people in my comments in multiple videos, telling me that they have bought Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma and they are really enjoying it and they really recommend it. They're really getting into it. I had so many people telling me, oh, you must play it, you must play it, you must play it. So yes, I bought it. I've played it. I've probably played I've only played it so far for I don't know exactly how long, but a few hours. Not enough to do my full review of it yet, but I can tell you it is a fantastic experience. I really like it. It's clearly a good value game in the sense that there's so much to do. It's a quality, polished experience. There's so much variety to it. I can't imagine getting bored of it anytime soon. And it is a full physical release from a really reputable publisher that I want to encourage to continue to release excellent games fully physically. So yes, Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma, highly recommended, and my number 5. Number 4, for similar reasons, Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition. Everybody knows the story of Cyberpunk, about how it launched in a not very good state, but then over time it got better and better and better. And yeah, for me, this is a game that lives up to the hype. It is typically, I'm not a kind of AAA open world person, but yeah, no, this game is really cool. It's got such a cool aesthetic. The story elements are cool. The driving is great. The combat is great. I like pretty much everything about Cyberpunk 2077. And on the Switch 2, it runs amazingly well. Yeah, it's not going to look as good as on an absolute top spec PC or the PS5 or the Series X or something like that, but it runs way better than on the Steam Deck, way better than on the Xbox One or the PS4. And CD Projekt Red put the game on the cartridge, the full game on the cartridge. Include things like a manual and stickers and nice little inserts in with the package. It's fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. You know, unless you are a child or you only play family-friendly 100% content, I don't see any reason not to recommend Cyberpunk 2077. And it is the number 2 best-selling physical game on the system, and I believe it's within the top 5 downloads for the system as well. And it absolutely deserves that. It's an excellent game and a real showcase for what can be done graphically with the system as well. And CD Projekt Red have done this exactly how they should have done. I did, by the way, I want to add a correction to myself here. I did, in a previous episode, cast some aspersions and say, well, CD Projekt Red, yes, they should be commended for releasing it fully physically on the 64 gig cart. Also, on the Switch 1, they were one of the few companies that released their games on a 32 gig cart as well for a AAA and not require extra downloads. We talk about Witcher 3. And I said, well, that either means that they're really into preservation and they really truly believe in putting the full game on the cartridge, even if it means that they'll make less profit per sale, or it means that Nintendo really wanted their AAA amazing game on the system at launch, so they cut them some kind of deal. Now, that might still be the case, but I've subsequently learned something that I didn't know. CD Projekt Red are the owners of GOG, G-O-G, Good Old Games. And Good Old Games is a company that I absolutely adore. I 100% am behind their mission, and their mission is basically preserving games history, keeping old games alive, making old games playable on modern PCs, and every single one of their games, yes, it's a digital storefront, but the games have no DRM, and if you buy a game from GOG, you can back it up on hard drives, you can copy it anywhere, you can port it to different systems. There is no DRM whatsoever. So they obviously are a company that really does care about video game preservation. So yeah, maybe that is why CD Projekt Red made sure that the entire game is on the Cyberpunk cartridge and was on the Witcher 3 cartridge as well, even though that meant using the most expensive cartridges for the Switch 1. So yeah, fantastic. And my slight casting aspersions of, well, maybe they got a deal. Well, maybe they did, but it sounds to me that even if they didn't, they are a company that would want to preserve the games and wouldn't want to use a keycard. So yeah, fantastic. CD Projekt Red, well done. Well done, CD Projekt Red, and thank you for GOG as a developer and as a fan of retro games, especially old PC DOS retro games and Windows 95, Windows 98 games. I really, really appreciate what GOG does. I think they're fantastic. Number 3 in my top 10 favorite games on the Switch so far is Street Fighter 6. Years 1 to 2 Fighters Edition is the full title. Street Fighter is a series that I have a huge amount of history with. I am an enormous fan of Capcom's fighting games. Street Fighter 2 was actually the reason why, as a Sega head, I bought a Super Nintendo in the first place. Is one of the reasons that I got into Nintendo gaming was because I wanted to play Street Fighter 2. And Street Fighter 6 is the best Street Fighter game in years, and the Switch 2 version is really good. Now, if I was going to be negative, I would point out the fact that it's a game keycard. I would also point out the fact that the DLC is not included with the game keycard. It's a separate code, so there's some issues there. But frankly, I want to put out a full review of Street Fighter 6, and I will cover all of that in detail there. But on the positive side, it's a fantastic game. It's a really, really, really good conversion of a fantastic game. It plays almost flawlessly. And if you don't care about the DLC, you can even pick up the base version for $40, and $40, frankly, that's a bargain. It is a really, really good game at its core. This is a really good version of it. And if you're even slightly on the fence, but you're a fan of one-on-one fighting games, I can absolutely recommend Street Fighter 6, and this is a great way to play the game. Number 2 in my top 10 is Sonic X Shadow Generations. Again, this is a game that I'm going to put out a full review of. I just need to get the time to put out the Street Fighter, and ever since launch, I've been meaning to put out a Sonic X Shadow Generations and a Street Fighter 6 review, because those are 2 launch day games, but they're games that I have a lot to say about. I want to talk about the history of Sonic games, both the 2D and 3D Sonic games. I want to talk about the history of Street Fighter 2 and Capcom's fighting games, but I also think there's interesting things to say specifically about the Switch 2 versions of both Street Fighter 6 and Sonic X Shadow Generations. I am an enormous Sonic fan. I'm an enormous platform game fan. And for now, before the release of Donkey Kong Bananza, Sonic X Shadow Generations is the 3D platform game on the system. It's absolutely an excellent port of an excellent game, and in some weird ways is even slightly better than the PS5 version, but I'll get into that in my review. But what I will say is, if you are even slightly into 3D platform games or have ever enjoyed a Sonic game in the past, Sonic Generations is considered one of the best modern Sonic games, and the extra shadow content is simply sublime. It's absolutely excellent. And the Switch 2 is a great way to play. My only negative point is, again, is a game key card, and there's no upgrade path. Same with Puyo Tetris. Sega haven't included an upgrade path from the Switch 1 version to the Switch 2 version, which is slightly frustrating. But again, if you are just buying games for the Switch 2, you don't care about that. If you just want to know, is it a good game? Yes. Is it worth the money? Yes. Will you enjoy it? Yes, I genuinely think you will. It's an excellent game. And my number 1, I'm sure many people will have predicted this because I already put out a full review and I often mention it. And I said in my review that it was my favorite game of the launch lineup, at least. And it continues to be my favorite game, including the new games that have been released since then. It's Fast Fusion. Fast Fusion, I won't say too much about it here because I did a full review, but if you like futuristic racing games, or if you want a graphical showcase to show what your new hardware can do, Fast Fusion is the game to buy. Unfortunately, there is no physical version available. It's just a digital game, but it is the cheapest, or one of the absolute cheapest games on the system. It's only $15, and that is an absolute bargain. There is a wealth of content here, and they're going to be adding more to it for free over time. Fast Fusion, excellent game. That is my number 1 game on the system so far. Okay, so back to the present. Have my opinions changed? We should probably look at what games have been released since then. Before moving on to entirely new games, I want to talk about one that I previously missed, and I think most English-speaking people probably did too, as it's not mentioned in any of Nintendo's English promotion, like their websites, etc. Shine Post Be Your Idol. This was a launch game, so it came out on June the 5th this year, but only in Japan, and not actually released in the rest of the world. As I said earlier, I did a previous 2-hour rundown of all 25 launch games for the Switch 2, and I made the recurring joke that Welcome Tour doesn't actually count as a game, so it's actually 24 games, not 25. Also, while the launch lineup had plenty of very good games, very few of them were exclusive. In fact, just 4, including Welcome Tour, so again, that's actually just 3 exclusive games. But what I didn't know at the time was Shinepost Be Your Idol was a thing. A full, real game kind of thing. So we are actually back up to 25 games. And it's a system exclusive. Yep, a very rare beast on the Switch too. So we are actually back up to 4 exclusive real titles at launch. Or 5 if you want to include Welcome Tour. And do you know what? The fact this was a Japan exclusive is a massive shame. Sure, it's an extremely Japanese game, if you know what I mean, but it's clearly extremely high quality, well made, pretty unique, and if they had released it in the West and pushed it as an exclusive title, I think many would have been curious enough to give it a chance, especially with that lovely Konami logo on the box. That's right, this is both developed and published by Konami, so that means that at launch, Konami had 2 system-exclusive titles out, when Nintendo could only muster 1 for their own machine. That's crazy. So, Shinepost is a fairly well-established mixed media franchise, from what I can tell, in Japan at least. It started in 2021 with a series of light novels, with manga starting to release in 2022, and that was followed by an anime series and even 2 live events in 2022 and 2023, so it must be pretty popular. However, this is the first video game based on the franchise, and the original creators, writers, and artists seem to have been fully involved. Many of you will have flinched a little when I said it was a Japanese game with the subtitle Be Your Idol. Thinking of Japanese idols, it's a good chance that you would assume that this is a simple musical rhythm action game, or perhaps even worse, some kind of dating sim with uncomfortably underage girls in various states of undress and sexualized costumes. Neither is true. It's actually a management sim of sorts, where you recruit and run a J-pop idol group, which does have sections that work like visual novels, yes, but it's far deeper than that, and while there are over 20 female idols in the game, from what I can see, there's pretty much no fan service or plot, in inverted commas, no randomly inserted beach episode in the story. Hell, from what I've seen, we don't even have any school uniforms or cat ear accessories. The girls all have preppy sports and dance-style outfits, sweatpants, t-shirts, and the like. They're all very pretty. You get a bit of midriff or the occasional pair of shorts, but, you know, this is a game that you aren't going to be worried will put you on some kind of list if you import it. Though, before anyone jumps on the woke, Sweet Baby Inc. making women in games ugly bandwagon, that's not even remotely what I mean. The girls are all typically impossibly beautiful anime girls. I just mean there isn't any jail-baiting lolicon shenanigans that you find in many games that are strategically kept in Japan for actual legal reasons. No, it seems the only reason it wasn't released in the West is simply that they didn't translate it into English. And that's a real shame. As I said, a unique, deep game with a decent level of polish and quality could have been very interesting to people on launch day, because Switch 2 was starved of original system-exclusive titles. I honestly think people might have given this a chance. If they translate it and release it now, it would probably remain a very niche otaku thing, and ironically the lack of fan service might even hurt it for the core otaku crowd. Sadly, I kind of think this one missed its opportunity. But that's genuinely a shame, as from what I can see, this looks really nice. If you're watching on YouTube rather than listening, you will see the trailer footage going on, and is it me, or is this some of the best 3D anime graphics, like, ever? Like, it's 3D models, but cel-shaded and with black outlines, etc., and when the characters pose and stop still, they just look like high-quality 2D anime drawings. But then they move in 3D space, and it's very impressive and pulls it off far better than many games that I can think of that attempt a similar thing. Usually with visual novel-style games, you have 2D art with a few poses, perhaps moving mouths and blinking eyes, or you have 3D models that look cheap and have significantly less character than the 2D art. But no, these models look like the real 2D drawings, and then they come to life. It's great. All the singing and voice acting is done with over 20 unique voice banks too, and frankly, while I don't speak Japanese, from what I've heard, at least, I would have not realized that it wasn't full voice acting. And of course, doing it this way allows for near infinite variety of outcomes given the management game style, and takes up a lot less storage space too. If you know about these things and stay abreast with anime news, you may have originally heard that the Shinepost game was planned to be a mobile title before switching to being a Switch 2 exclusive, but honestly, you would absolutely never know. There is nothing here that would be possible in a mobile game. If the graphics were still PNG characters with moving mouths and there was just a few voice samples, absolutely this would work on a mobile. But with these level of graphics and with this level of AI singing and voice acting, I can't imagine this working on even the highest end mobile. This is definitely a console exclusive game from the ground up. They just initially planned it to be mobile and obviously realized, no, we want to do something more ambitious. So they moved it to be a Switch 2 exclusive along the way. So yeah, sadly, I personally don't speak any Japanese, and there are currently no English language subtitles, so this game is completely inaccessible to me, and I imagine to the majority of my audience too, but I do know at least one of our regular listeners is pretty much fluent and can play Japanese language titles with no worries, so if you're listening, I imagine you already knew about this game, but if you don't, I'd love to hear your opinion on it. If you can understand Japanese and think this sounds like a bit of you, from what I can see at least, I'd say this is actually definitely worth a go. Sadly, though, just as with Konami's other games for Switch 2 so far, the physical release is a game keycard. And it costs $70, which is kind of steep for a game keycard, but it is par for the course with other third-party launch title games, and it's a management sim with near infinite replay value. The download is only 8GB, which is insanely good given how nice the graphics are and how it's all fully voice acted and fully sang. Again, the fact it's using those voice banks rather than separate recordings is really efficient and seems to have been done really, really well here. Again, much better than many other similar games that I've seen attempt this kind of thing. So, for the purposes of this episode's theme, there is no chance that this game can enter into my top 10, unfortunately, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to mention it, as I felt it was an injustice when I realised that such a quality, polished title had been accidentally left out of my coverage of the launch lineup. And I think Konami really should be congratulated for releasing 2 full system exclusives for launch, which appear to be pretty deep and have a lot of content, as well as the excellent Suikoden 1 and 2 remakes. They really put out a lot of quality titles on day one. More than even Nintendo managed, unless you count the releases of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So, well done, Konami. Nice one. Now, please give us a Castlevania game, or Contra, or both. Please. Next game for us to consider as a contender for our top 10 is Raidou Remastered, or Raidou Remastered: The Mystery of the Soulless Army, to give it its full title. It's a Sega-published game developed by Atlus, which always implies a certain level of quality, of course, and it has the distinction of being the first game to release after the launch titles, coming out on the 19th of June, as it did. I already did a full review of this game, so if you haven't checked it out already, you can go listen to that if you are interested on my full thoughts. But yeah, I really like this one. It's an RPG, a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei franchise, part of the Devil Summoner series, and a full ground-up remake of a somewhat lost PS2 classic, but given a full modern reinvention, many changes and improvements. It's a simultaneous Switch 1 and 2 game, so it's not exactly pushing the system technically, but it does run a lot better on the Switch 2. While being a JRPG, it has a pretty unique premise, being a detective noir story set in the 1930s, I believe, Tokyo. And it has real-time combat and no random battles, so it's both less generic and more accessible than many games in the genre. It also has a talking black cat, which let me put Salem Saberhagen in the thumbnail of my review. Fun fact I discovered while making the thumbnail that in France, Salem actually got a whole series of young adult novels based around him, and I photoshopped it so that the Raidou characters are reading one of them on the thumbnail. Considering that I live in France and have my very own black cat who lives with me, and she sometimes helps me make these episodes, I have 2 cats, and this is very much their house that I just very much have the privilege of being allowed to share with them. I now want to track down the entire series of books to add to mon bibliothèque français. Clearly classics of the genre up there with Victor Hugo and Jules Verne, no doubt. Anyway, the game Raidou Remastered is really good, and I think it would easily get a place in my top 20 were I compiling that, but I think it will struggle to break into the top 10. And that's not an insult to the game, though, it's just because there is so much quality already there. So if you're a fan of JRPGs or detective mystery style stories, I can heartily recommend this game. Again, go check out my full review if you're interested in it. The next game released that I hadn't covered at the time of my compiling my top 10 was Shadow Labyrinth, developed and published by Bandai Namco. The main reason I didn't cover this game is it released on the 18th of July, just one day after Donkey Kong Bananza, and for me, I'm afraid there was no way I was going to tear myself away from my beloved Bananza to be able to dedicate enough time to honestly give this one a fair review. I did buy it, however, so let's take this opportunity to give a mini overview, as it's at the very least an interesting premise, and it's available at a reasonable price too. Some of you might remember the animated anthology series Secret Level that came out on Amazon at the end of 2024, I believe, where each episode was based on a different video game. It was created by Tim Miller, who you might know as the director of Deadpool and Terminator Dark Fate, and one of the main producers of the Sonic live-action movies, which I love, by the way. I personally thought the series was overall pretty good, though one reason it became infamous is that while most of the episodes were based on timeless classics like Warhammer 40k, Space Marine, Unreal Tournament, Armored Core, even Dungeons & Dragons, Mega Man and Pac-Man, they had one episode based on Concord, which hadn't released at the time, but obviously went down as one of the biggest failures and embarrassments in gaming history, with the service being taken down almost immediately after launch, and all retail copies taken off shelves and refunds issued to people who bought in the week or two when they were available. So dedicating an entire episode to that was somewhat of a shame. Probably the second most infamous episode, however, was the Pac-Man episode, because rather than what you might expect when imagining an animated episode based on Pac-Man, the series went with a dark sci-fi title where a humanoid creature with no memories, known only as Swordsman Number 7, wakes up in a large underground complex, a labyrinth of sorts, or maze, you see what they did there, and he is told that he is the chosen one and he must escape. Considering the dark art style and the human using a sword, it all seemed very serious and far removed from what we know as Pac-Man. However, there is a floating yellow orb named Puck, who talks to him, guides him, and sometimes merges with him to give him certain powers of attack or traversal. Those of you who know your history will realize that the original name of Pac-Man on its creation was Puck-Man, because of his resemblance to a hockey puck, but they were worried that people in the West would vandalize the arcade cabinets to turn the P into an F, and so he became Pac-Man. Without giving spoilers as to what happens in the episode, because, you might be interested to check it out, Shadow Labyrinth is a sequel to this episode, and you control Swordsman Number 8 in a very similar setup. It's an interesting concept, but it's all very silly, and it feels a little overblown and like it's taking itself far more seriously than any game based on Pac-Man arguably should. The graphic style of the maze and the ghosts that you encounter is barely recognizable for most of the time, and it's only really when you fuse with Puck and temporarily look like Pac-Man and can perform certain moves that feel reminiscent of the game that you feel any kind of connection to the series at all. It's a Metroidvania game, a genre I'm a really big fan of. Literally, earlier in this episode, I asked Konami for more Castlevania titles. I also mentioned that I'm developing 4 games of my own, and the biggest and most ambitious of those titles is a Metroidvania title. This really is a genre that I enjoy when it's done well. But it's also one that I'm very tired of having generic, blandly designed copy-paste titles quickly shat out every few hours. It's one of those genres where I kind of honestly feel that the very best titles are some of the very best games ever made, but you have to wade through some of the blandest cookie-cutter dross ever made in order to get to them. As for Pac-Man, again, I'm a huge fan of the license, and some of my favourite games ever involve the little guy. I've a ton of Pac-Man merch and toys that I've been collecting literally my whole life. Similar to what I said in my Donkey Kong review, I've been alive throughout every up and down for the character. The first Pac-Man game was released just, I think, less than a year before I was born. And I've lived through every game release from Miss Pac-Man onwards. It's just as I said with the Metroidvania games, you could count some Pac-Man games as absolutely in my top tier gaming experiences of my life, but sadly many of them are also completely forgettable shovelware or worse. So where does this game fall then? Honestly, if you'd have said to me to imagine a Pac-Man based Metroidvania, I would have actually got very excited, as I can imagine how that could be an absolutely incredible game, but what they've made here is not even remotely what I would have imagined. On the one hand, I want to give it brownie points for being a truly original and surprising reimagining of the series, but on the other hand, it's very, very difficult for me to get past the fact that I, unfortunately, I'm sorry, really don't like the art style. I am genuinely, truly sorry in advance for what I'm about to say. I know it'll rub some people up the wrong way, and some people will disagree, and that's perfectly fine. It's a matter of taste. Look, the art is clean and crisp, sure, and I've seen some people even praising it, but it's divisive, to say the least, and to me, it is just plain ugly. It looks like those early 2000s shovelware budget PC titles, which used kind of clip art and poorly rendered 3D with everything being kind of metallic or glowy or shiny for no reason. Even the cover art looks like the type of game that you'd have seen in a gas station for $1.99. The logo and the art are just awful, generic slop, and the in-game graphics look similarly like they could be reusing assets from an early 2000s clip art library for creating click-and-play games or flash titles. Do you remember that awful time when they tried to make an edgy Bomberman game but replaced all the cartoon characters with rendered humans in shiny metal 90s CGI with PNG explosions and thought people would think it was somehow cooler? And everyone roundly rejected it as one of the ugliest games that had ever been made. Yet that's what this looks like to me. Only with high-res graphics, auto-tweening between positions like a Macromedia Flash browser game. As an artist myself, I really, really hate to criticize work that I know somebody will have worked very hard on. And I'm sure that it is all unique art created just for this game. But for me, the style just feels so generic and without personality while moving like a tweened Flash title that it's just really hard for me to get past. I'm sure this is a matter of taste. And as I said, I have seen some people praising it. But in the comments section of like every video that I've found about the title, I see many people getting the same genuine ick as me when they look at it, so I'm far from alone in feeling like this. It is a real shame. I feel guilty, and again, I apologize to the artists involved. It's technically good work, just in a style that brings to mind many of the worst tropes of a certain quite dark period in gaming. Maybe some people are nostalgic for that style, and that's why we're here. I don't know. Maybe people who were literally growing up and had their formative years when that kind of overly shiny chrome or just everything being kind of brown and grey was cool. Maybe I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here. Let me know in the comments if you like the way this looks. I'm genuinely interested. To me, I really don't. But again, I don't want to crap on other people's work. I'm sure it's a me thing. It just feels to me like this is the exact opposite of what I personally find visually appealing. Except for the odd flashes of neon color and pixel art that do randomly appear. But they are few and far between, and I feel they seem completely separate to the normal art style, to the point that it makes the standard art feel like placeholders from another game, to my eyes at least. In the random occasional times when it turns into kind of more colourful, more pixely graphics, it feels to me, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. But the two styles to me just don't mesh at all. But of course, graphics aren't everything, and the gameplay is where it does genuinely start to get interesting. I played it for a couple of hours to get the feel and give it a chance, and it does control well, and there is some interesting level design even early on, and attacking and movement mechanics going on. It's not just a standard generic Metroidvania. It's got some interesting ideas. It's clearly a step above, the most generic copy-paste Metroidvanias, and the times when it all goes a bit Pac-Man, with sections where you get neon-tinged pixel graphics like I mentioned, and a proper Pac-Man maze rather than just a kind of Metroidvania, everything's made out of squares look. It starts to feel more interesting to me in those moments, and I'm sure that there's probably a good game under here if you aren't put off by the art style, but honestly, for me, with it releasing a day after DK Bananza, after that first 2 hours of playing it, I've not felt inclined to go back to it and give it more of a chance. So, I'm sorry, I can't review the game, I can't give it a score or anything like that. It would be extremely unfair of me to do so, having seen so little of the campaign, but I wanted to at least cover it, because I'm sure there are some people that are looking at the graphics and thinking, hey, it looks okay, and as I said, the gameplay itself has potential, and from what I've played, it seems like it could be pretty fun. It's not a system exclusive. You can play this on PC, PS5, Xbox Series S, X, and the Switch One as well. And here's the kicker. If you buy on Switch One, you get the full game on the cartridge, whereas the physical release of the Switch 2 version isn't even a keycard, it's a code in a box. I've previously heaped praise upon Bandai Namco for releasing a full physical copy of Tamagotchi Plaza, a game that I did a full review on. I wasn't expecting to like it, but I was actually pleasantly surprised by it, and I'll happily recommend to anyone that's even vaguely interested in it. However, I do understand that Bandai Namco wanted to release this game, Shadow Labyrinth, as a $30 kind of budget-ish game. And as I've discussed at length in other episodes, unfortunately, at the moment, it's basically impossible to release a proper physical Switch 2 game at that price point. And even a game keycard, it's hard to make a profit on at that price. So I don't actually blame them, though it does make it even harder to recommend the Switch 2 version code in a box. For those who don't know my other episodes, trust me, I'm a game dev and publisher myself, and that $30 price point is actually exactly where I was planning on targeting my own games themselves when they came to the Switch 2, including the Metroidvania that I mentioned. So I do kind of know what I'm talking about, as it has put me in a real dilemma if Nintendo don't change their policies. But as we covered in another episode, it does look like they are working on a solution. For now, though, we are left with the annoying releases like this, where you end up buying an empty box just to put on the shelf. Yay. At least it only takes up 8GB of storage, and that's not too bad, and it won't take too long to download. Here's a really weird thing, though, and credit to the channel Switch Corner. They made an interesting video on this, where they pointed out that the Switch 1 version somehow actually runs much better than the Switch 2 version. There is literally no excuse for that. The Switch 1 version does run at 720p, which upscales to 1080 when docked. The Switch 2 version runs at 1080 or 4K, but the real difference is the frame rate. The Switch 1 version is pretty much locked at 60 FPS, whereas the Switch 2 version is constantly fluctuating anywhere between 40 and 60, and it stutters a lot, especially when changing areas. The Switch 1 version has longer loading times on startup, but once you are playing, there's no worries, and the loading of the Switch 1 version is much faster when you play it on the Switch 2. And honestly, with these graphics, does the difference between 4K or 1080p make very much difference to 720? Not really. In fact, I'd argue half the problem with the graphics, as far as to my eyes, but also from reading other people's comments as well, half the problem with the graphics is they are too clean. Especially for something that's meant to be kind of dark and dingy in a Metroidvania. They look too clean, too crisp, too perfect. They don't look organic or real. So actually having a lower resolution, slightly fuzzier version might even look better, and the 4K makes them look worse. So yeah, I can't give a fair review of this game because I've not played enough of it, and my personal bias against the art style would make it too hard to do so anyway. But if you do like the look of it, which I know some people will, I do think it's an interesting and original idea, and it seems to play pretty well, and it is a reasonable price. It's one of the cheaper games on the system, so maybe give it a try. But if you do, perhaps buying the physical Switch 1 copy and playing it on your Switch 2 is the best way to go. The full game is on the Switch 1 cart, and unless the Switch 2 version gets patched, you might find it even performs significantly better. And again, to Bandai Namco's credit, if you buy the Switch 1 version, you can upgrade it to Switch 2 for free. Thank you. I've criticized other big companies like Sega for not offering this option repeatedly. But again, unless they fix things with the patch, we're in a weird position where you might not actually want to upgrade, because for now, at least, the Switch 1 version actually runs better, and it runs fine on the Switch 2. And again, credit to Switch Corner for trying this, but once you download the update to the digital Switch 1 version on Switch 2, it's quite difficult to revert back to the original. So you really want to play the Switch 1 version directly from the cartridge, even if you're on a Switch 2. Don't download the free update, unless it gets patched, and, Google around and see whether that has changed over time. I hope it does. I hope Bandai Namco fixes this. So yeah, obviously this game not entering my top 10, but I'm not really giving it a yay or a nay. I think this will be your mileage may vary as to whether you think it looks cool. And if you do think it looks cool, I do want to give props to Bandai Namco for releasing at a reasonable price point and offering the free upgrade. But yeah, as I said, maybe go for the Switch 1 physical version instead of the Switch 2. And we hope this isn't really Bandai Namco's fault, or the performances, but the releasing on a code in a box isn't really Bandai Namco's fault. It's Nintendo's fault, and hopefully things will change as time goes by, and we'll see this happen less often. Next game to look at would be WWE 2K25, released on the 23rd of July. But if you've seen my full review of that game, or anti-review as I called it, you'll know that it doesn't really have a chance of inclusion, I'm afraid. It's not that it's not a good game. It's got pretty decent reviews all round, truth be told, but to me, the pricing structure is so ridiculous and so predatory that it just automatically is excluded from even being considered. To get a physical copy on your shelf, like I prefer, and to have all the content, including important stuff like WrestleMania and The Undertaker and The Rock, things that real wrestling fans would want, it will cost you $200. And you will still probably, or actually certainly, need to buy microtransactions on top of that $200 if you want to compete with others online. A ridiculous amount of DLC plus pay-to-win mechanics just put a really bad taste in my mouth and took me from actually genuinely looking forward to the game to deciding to basically completely boycott it. However, if you are a fan of wrestling, have a nostalgia for old 80s and 90s WWF games, or just want to hear me making multiple Hulk Hogan quotation puns, you might want to check out my review. It was a fun episode to make, and coincidentally, I made it a few days before Hulk Hogan's sad passing, so I'm glad to have been able to make my own little tribute of sorts. As I said in the follow-up comment that I left after the news was announced, while personally I might have had some issues or political disagreements with Terry Bollea, the man, the character of Hulk Hogan that he created and embodied was a huge part of so many people's childhoods, including my own, and was a great role model for kids in the 80s and early 90s. So I'm glad that completely coincidentally I got to make a loving tribute to him just before he passed. But yeah, the game itself, sorry, not even in the equation. I hope by 2K26 they will have toned down the greed a little, but I have a feeling that this is just the new norm with a lot of these yearly sports games, and I'm just out of the loop and I hadn't realized quite how bad things had gotten. It's just not for me though. Ish. Finally, to consider adding into the new top 10, we have Super Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 Edition Plus Jamboree TV. Man, what a stupid title. Let's just call it Mario Party Jamboree TV. Released on 24th of July, exactly a week ago from when this will hopefully go live, I was originally planning on doing a full review and putting it up on launch day. However, I've waited because, frankly, I'm still not quite sure what to actually make of it. It's one of the few games where, after playing it, rather than make my review based on my own independent thoughts, I actually felt inclined to go and watch and read everyone else's reviews and feedback to see what they were saying, because I genuinely couldn't quite process what I'd just experienced. And I'm evidently not alone, as I came across several professional reviews using the same word. Baffling. Baffled is pretty accurate. That is definitely how I felt. Look, it doesn't mean that the game is bad. It's not. You'll find many reviews saying that it's the best Mario Party game ever, and they aren't exactly wrong. I find it hard to disagree with that as a statement by itself. But it's also just so disappointing compared to what it could have been, and has so many stupid decisions that make it seem rushed and badly designed, and it's just a complete mess, and it feels like it needed a few more months of work to iron out all of the problems. It's frustrating so often when it just doesn't need to be. But it is still technically the best Mario Party game ever. See, here's the thing. I thought that the game was going to be very easy to review. I'm pretty familiar with the Mario Party series, and I can talk about the history of it and why I genuinely do feel that the Switch 1 version of Mario Party Jamboree was the best Mario Party game ever. No questions there. So what we were expecting was just an upgrade to that game, making the graphics a little nicer, adding new mini-games and gameplay modes that use the unique features of the Switch 2, like the camera and the microphone. If that's all we got, it would have been a very easy recommendation, even if there is the caveat that if you buy the complete boxed Switch 2 version rather than upgrading your old Switch 1 version, you have an $80 price tag. In fact, we're left with exactly the same kind of problems of the other two $80 games currently available. The kind of rushed, uneven, unfinished nature of certain parts of Mario Kart World, and the it's an old game, but we're actually charging $10 more for it of Tears of the Kingdom. Except in this case, it's even worse, because it feels even more uneven and unfinished, and it's $20 more, not $10. But none of that is to say that it's not a good game. The main game is still the same good game that it's always been, but it is barely touched here, and doesn't get the graphical upgrade that you're probably expecting. the new features get weirdly and awkwardly tacked on in a way that often involves wasting literal minutes moving between menus to go from the old to the new content, and only the new content gets a nice graphical update, meaning that the old content looks noticeably worse when frequently skipping between the two, and none of it matches or feels like a cohesive package. The reason I haven't reviewed it yet is I'm very aware that the main thing that will make it worth playing to some people is playing the brand new modes exclusively and using the camera and playing online. I can, in theory, see how this could be a really cool experience, so in order to give it a fair shout, I am waiting until I can organise a proper multiplayer session with friends who all own a Switch 2 and the game and a camera, so that I can give the new modes an actual fair try. I mentioned in my Puyo Tetris 2S video that it was a difficult game to review because the underlying game is very good, but the new version brings almost nothing new to the table and is more expensive, and I also mentioned how one of the only new additions was a version that used the camera to put the players on screen and be able to see the reactions of your opponents. I said that I felt that this was a pretty niche use case and I couldn't imagine many people would actually want to do it, and it seems that I was proven right because we've just this week heard reports that only around 5% of people who bought a Switch 2 bothered to buy a camera at the same time. So if you're one of the 95% of Switch 2 players that doesn't own the camera and doesn't care about it, you are probably literally better off picking up a cheap second-hand copy of the Switch 1 version. As I said, it is a genuinely good game. I do feel that it is the best in the series and a real return to form in recent years after some dark times for Mario Party during the Wii and Wii U era. But as a Switch 2 game, especially at $80, no, I can't recommend this, or at least not strongly enough to put it in my top 10 games. I'm still planning on doing a full review when I can organise a proper multiplayer session. That might cement to me whether it's actually worth the money or who it might be worth the money for in what circumstances. I imagine that the small use case of families or friend groups who are separated and want to play together online and will find it funny or even comforting to see each other's faces and reactions will have a lot of fun. So I don't want to insult the game. It's just that the overall package is really rushed and shoddily put together with decisions that literally do feel baffling. When you heard about them making an expansion pack for Mario Party, you almost certainly imagined exactly the same thing that all the rest of us did, but that's not what you have here. It's a weird, jumbled mess of stuff awkwardly kind of mashed together and tacked on the side, and with graphics that don't match and controls that don't match and menus that don't line up, and even if the individual stuff is good, which it is, it makes it hard to review. And it actually makes the original version feel more like a quality package. It doesn't mean that I don't recommend it, though. As I said, the Switch 1 version is the best Mario Party game, in my opinion. Certainly the best modern one. And this is exactly the same game, but with some more extra stuff, and you might enjoy that new extra stuff. But it's expensive and poorly executed. Feels like I'm saying this far too often these days, but maybe Nintendo will fix some of the issues with an upgrade patch? In the meantime, what do you think of Mario Party Jamboree TV? Did you buy the upgrade? Did you pay $80 for the full game? Are you having fun with it? I genuinely hope so. And let me know if you are interested in me eventually putting out a full review when I feel like I can give it an honest appraisal after playing every mode fully with all forms of multiplayer to get the full picture and give a thorough, honest review for that 5% or so of people who actually, are in the right situation to be able to experience all of those modes. The more time passes, the less relevant my review will be, I suppose, but honestly, it would feel dishonest for me to put out a half-assed video just to get clicks. But maybe I'll separate this as a separate clip, and then I can half-ass that just to get clicks instead. Haha! I found a way around it. Let me know if you want me to do a full review, though. I am planning on doing it. It's just that the more time passes, the less relevant I actually feel that it will be to people. So, of course, the elephant in the room, or gorilla, I suppose, is Donkey Kong Bananza. I think we can all guess that it will be in my newly updated top 10, but can it grab the top spot? In my previous video with my top 10 most anticipated games before it released, it was my number one pick of games that I could not wait for. So let's just quickly insert a clip of what I said back then. And number one, this is pretty predictable if you know me and if you listen to my episodes, but number one game that I'm most looking forward to is Donkey Kong Bananza. I'll be doing my first impressions review on the day of release, and then we'll be talking more and more about it afterwards, because frankly, I have not been so excited for a game in maybe a decade. This game is so a bit of me. There's nothing about this game that I don't absolutely love the look of. Frankly, I could not be more excited about this game. So, as you can hear, I was probably excited to say the least. And then, on release, I did my first impressions review. Here's a few choice quotes from that review just to show how I was feeling at the time. I am already obsessed. I kid you not, so far. This is a candidate for my favourite game of quite literally all time. Yes, above any Sonic game, even any Mario game. It's that good, and at the very least, it is a 10 out of 10. And in my entire time reviewing games professionally, or at least semi-professionally, since the late 90s, I'm not sure that I've ever actually given a 10 out of 10 before. But from what I've played so far, it's as close to perfect as I can imagine a 3D platformer ever being. Even if there is never another good game released for the system, this justifies the price of entry. I would have bought the console just for this title alone. This is a once-in-a-generation game, maybe once in a lifetime. It is that good, in my opinion. Well, that was 2 weeks ago. Obviously, I've been playing the game a lot more. I've completed the story campaign and spent a lot of time with the post-game and going back and trying to 100% it and playing with different aspects. Has my opinion changed? Would I still give it a 10 out of 10? Is it actually my favourite game of all time? Or was I overexcited and now the novelty has worn off? I'm less enthused about the whole thing. More importantly for this video at least, will it take the number one spot in my Switch 2 games top 10? Well, let's get into it. To be clear, for the purpose of this top 10, these are Nintendo Switch 2 games only, i.e. I'm not including Switch 1 games that just happen to be compatible with Switch 2, nor am I including anything on Switch 2 Online, like the GameCube games, etc. Switch 2 editions that are available as full purchase in a Switch 2 retail box are eligible, unlike the previously mentioned Mario Party Jamboree TV, even though you may have guessed from how I talked about it previously that that particular game won't be breaking into this list anytime soon, unless they heavily updated it and try and fix all my issues with it. So, to recap very quickly, the previous top 10 was honourable mentions Mario Kart, Yakuza, Hitman, Deltarune, and various RPGs. Then, number 10, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild by extension. If you haven't played Tears of the Kingdom, you should probably play Breath of the Wild first. Number 9, Tamagotchi Plaza. Number 8, Arcade Archives 2 Ridge Racer. Number 7, Puyo Tetris 2S. And number 6, No Man's Sky. Number 5, Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma. Number 4, Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition. Number 3, Street Fighter 6 Years 1 and 2 Fighters Edition. Number 2, Sonic X Shadow Generations. Number 1, the excellent Fast Fusion. Well, it's been 3 weeks since then. New games have come out. Old games have been played more. I think the Switch 2 is in a much better position library-wise than it was back then. So how would I reshuffle my new top 10? You know, I think I was a bit harsh on Mario Kart World. Yes, it's not a perfect game. Yes, there are things I find very frustrating about it. And yes, I feel that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is probably a better game overall. But not including it in the top 10, especially so early in the console's life, was pretty bold, wasn't it? I think part of the reason I was so hard on it at the time was it was the big exclusive system seller, and I felt it was letting the side down a bit. But now that we have DK Bananza to blaze the trail and other big games like Pokemon ZA, Metroid Prime 4, etc. on the close horizon, I'm feeling that a bit of pressure can be taken off its shoulders. And you know what? There is a lot of good there, and a lot of fun to be found in Mario Kart World. And that soundtrack really should have been good enough to justify inclusion just on its own. The new parkour and traversal moves have definitely grown on me too, and I find more and more ways to use them the more I get used to the tracks. And while I'm still not completely in love with the game, I think it deserves to be in the top 10. So that is going to be my new updated number 10. Number 10, Mario Kart World. The previous number 10 was Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, and I think there would be rioting in the streets if I didn't include them, and frankly, I'd be doing a disservice for anyone considering whether to buy them or not if I didn't include them. So we need to remove something. It's a shame, but I think I'm going to have to remove Ridge Racer. It's an amazing arcade title, and I love it dearly. I have done ever since 1993 when it first came out. But realistically, it's an arcade title from the 90s with very little in the way of content. So it can't really hold its own as a modern recommendation when compared to something huge like Mario Kart World or a Zelda open world title. So yeah, number 9 is Zelda Tears of the Kingdom Nintendo Switch 2 edition, unless you haven't played Zelda Breath of the Wild, in which case play that one first. So that actually means that number 8 goes to Tamagotchi Plaza, moving up a spot from number 9, just kind of by default. In a way that feels a bit silly. It's a relatively simple kids game, but as I said, it's a quality experience, and it is an exclusive game if you include the original content. And it's one of only a handful of games where there is an actual physical version with the full game on the cartridge, and that still counts for a lot, so I want to signal boost it. Even though it's climbed the ranks this time, it's definitely hanging on by a thread, because the next time I do this top 10, I'll probably want to add more new games, and it will make sense to lose this one rather than Mario Kart or Zelda. But for those saying that it should be below those titles anyway, I would point out that for what it really is a quality polished title, and taken at face value for its target market, I can't really find things to complain about. You know, I can't say that for Mario Kart in its current state. And Tears of the Kingdom is hurt by being $80 and a re-release of an old game. Tamagotchi Plaza is $50 and a brand new title. With that said, it should enjoy its time in the sun, and I'm sure the next time we do this top 10, it will be replaced by a bigger experience that will appeal to a wider audience. But once again, I'll say, if you are a parent with young kids, I promise you that Tamagotchi Plaza will give you plenty of good memories playing together as a family, and that is worth its inclusion here all alone. At number 7, it's No Man's Sky, previously number 6. It's moving down a place and knocking out Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S. A really great game, but as we've already said, the Switch 1 version is cheaper and arguably better in several ways, so that counts against it. Sega could potentially bring it back by merging the online servers and allowing people free upgrades from Switch 1 to 2, but until they do, I'm afraid there's no longer room for Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S in this increasingly crowded top 10 of excellence. No Man's Sky might not be an exclusive game, but the Switch 2 version is excellent, and as we've said before, there is literally endless content here. It's the one game on this list that you could literally play every day for a lifetime and never see 100% of what it has to offer. And while there is sadly no physical version, you do get a free upgrade from the Switch 1 version. So that counts way more than Sega's refusal to let you upgrade from Puyo Tetris 2. So extreme kudos to Hello Games for that. And as for companies deserving extreme kudos, CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition is at number 6. I previously had it at number 4, and it's still arguably the number 1 pick for most people when it comes to a third-party title on the Switch 2, and I hugely admire how enormous and ambitious the game is, how well it plays on Switch 2, and how the entire game is on the cartridge, and the physical version comes in an excellent package with manual, stickers, etc. This is how a physical release should be. The only reason it's moving down slightly is my personal taste and preference for games, and the fact that I have actually gotten more playtime out of my number 5 game, which is Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma. It was number 5 last time, and I'm keeping it in that spot while other games have moved down. The more I play this game, the more I really appreciate how original it is, how much variety in the gameplay styles there are, and it's just a little bit more my pace than something more aggressive and violent like Cyberpunk. Again, it's a game where the full game is on the cartridge. Congratulations to Marvelous, and all credit to them for having that policy for all their games. I'm really looking forward to Story of Seasons, and especially Daemon X Machina. The sequel looks absolutely fantastic, Titanic Scion. I still haven't got round to doing a full review of Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma because, frankly, I've been playing Donkey Kong Bananza so much that I haven't managed to play Rune Factory enough to fully get far enough into the game that I feel I can justify a full review, but I will release a full review eventually because it's great, and the more I play it, the more I find that I'm enjoying the game. So I can absolutely recommend it, and I've had so many people in my comments saying that they're playing it and they're enjoying it too. So it's a strong recommendation from pretty much everybody. I've not heard anybody say they don't like it. Moving down from number 3 to number 4 is a Street Fighter 6 Years 1 to 2 Fighters Edition, and from number 2 to number 3 is Sonic X Shadow Generations. Nothing has changed. I still love those two games to death, and I still plan on doing full reviews of them when I get the time. Neither are system exclusive titles, but both are basically the best recent titles in the long-running series that I have dearly loved since the very early 90s. And the Switch 2 is actually my favourite way to play both of them. Highly recommended, but they've got to move down a spot each to make room. So that only leaves 2 spots left. Can my previous number 1 game, Fast Fusion, hold on to the top spot? Well, no. Obviously, it's at number 2. There's no way it could compete with the juggernaut of a pretty much flawless AAA full-budget Nintendo mascot platformer now, could it? But that doesn't take anything away from Fast Fusion. It is still the best game from the launch lineup, still the best racing game, still potentially the best graphics showcase on the system too. Incredibly playable, tons of replay value, and it's $15. That is amazing value. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please do yourself a favour and check out my full-length review, or just go buy it now. It's only $15. Just take the risk, I promise you. It's amazing. So, my number 1 game is, predictably, Donkey Kong Bananza. In my early review, I gave it a tentative 10 out of 10, and now that I've played it for much longer, completed the main game and much of the post-game, I can happily say that it is still a 10 for me. The game got better the more that I played it, and the post-game is still so much fun. I still don't see myself stopping playing it anytime soon. It's one of those games that I just, when I'm not playing it, I think about playing it and I want to go back to it. I just find it such fun. It's just pure escapism for me. This is an absolute all-timer, and one that I think I'll keep coming back to basically forever. It's comfortably in my top 5 favourite games ever, and it is in competition for number 1. Is it a 100% perfect game? No. There are very minor things that could be improved. If I were to give it a percentage score, I'd probably give it maybe 98%. My biggest issue is the camera when you're digging underground. It definitely could be improved, and I don't like how it always snaps back behind you after you adjust it. So if you want to hold it at a certain angle for whatever platforming reason, you have to readjust it regularly. But the camera is always an issue with 3D platform games, and this is still a million times better than most. I would say it's perfect when you're overground. And in a game where there are a million more difficult or even impossible situations for the camera to deal with, it's amazing that they've got it this right. For the majority of my playthrough, it didn't bother me in the slightest. So that's maybe the 1% knocked off, so it's not 100%. And how about the other 100% to get us to 98? Well, there's some stuff that I just wish was included in the post-game that's not. Most notably, while I love that Diddy and Dixie Kong were included in the game, I wish that in the post-game you could have them accompany you instead of Pauline. It's not that I don't love Pauline, I adore her and think that the story is great and her growth and interactions with DK are perfect. It's just that I grew up with the DKC games and I would love for Diddy and Dixie to get to do more. But then that's what sequels are for, right? I think a sequel with multiple playable Kongs would be amazing. Or a spin-off where Diddy and Dixie get to go on an adventure, that would be cool too. I guess it's a bit like how I felt when I completed Mario 64 for the first time. I adored that game, and I was so happy when I... spoilers for a 25, 30-year-old game. When I found Yoshi on the top of the castle. But there was that element of being slightly disappointed that you could find Yoshi, but you couldn't then get on him and ride him. It would have been so cool in the post-game if you could ride Yoshi, even if it was just round the castle. And that's kind of how I feel with Diddy and Dixie here. It's fine that they weren't, playable in the main game. I love the game between Pauline and DK. I think it was perfect. But in the post game where you're just messing around, it would be so cool if you could just have Diddy and Dixie to follow you instead. And I also had a comment from Buttons and Boxes that one of her kids actually wished that you could play through with Oddrock instead of Pauline. And again, I can't see why that couldn't be added as an update of something that could be added in post-game easily enough, and that would be really cool too. But I think other than that, really, the game is basically perfect, and I've had so much fun with it, and I totally stick by my assertion that even if no other game ever released, Donkey Kong Bananza is the killer app that justifies my purchase of a Switch 2. The only real negative spot that some people will have is, and this is a very sad issue, that some people are having those issues with motion sickness that you might have heard about. I truly, deeply love this game, and the fact that there is a small percentage of people that can't enjoy it because of that issue, it genuinely makes me very sad to think about. If you have experienced this, I recommend turning off the camera shake, dampening the camera sensitivity, and playing docked rather than handheld so you won't have issues with the screen ghosting. I'll talk about my issues with the screen and why it might be causing this for some people in another video. This isn't the place. For now, I'm just offering possible solutions to hopefully allow more people to enjoy this truly incredible title. Because for me, I've had no issues with motion sickness, and I just adore the game. And it's just so sad that some people can't experience it because of that. So I hope what I've just said there will help you a little bit. I've many full episodes on the game planned and at least partially recorded and edited, as I mentioned before, so I'll leave it there for now. Those episodes keep getting delayed because Nintendo keeps doing time-sensitive stuff, like the Direct today or tomorrow and Pokemon Presents, but trust me, I will be doing multiple videos before my final, full, detailed review, really paying full tribute to this game. I can't tell you how much I love it. I think it's still too early to say if by the time the dust has settled, it will take the number one top spot as my favorite game of all time for any system, but it's very, very close. And I honestly can't imagine any new Switch 2 game or PS5 or Series X or PC game of the modern era taking the top spot in my top 10 modern games, and certainly not in the top 10 for the Switch 2 as a console. But then again, we do have Pokemon ZA on the horizon, which you may have heard me breaking down recently. I'm really looking forward to that, especially the fact that it's, a French Pokemon game set in a version of Paris. That just is so cool to me. But there's so much about that game that is really exciting. Metroid Prime 4. Wow, yes please. Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, obviously. Splatoon Raiders, Demon X Machina, as I mentioned. Kirby Starcross World, and so many more games that will be hunting for a place in the top 10. I'm often pretty negative on this channel, and there are things in the news and decisions that Nintendo seem to be making which constantly give me valid things to complain about, but the most important thing is always the games, and on that front, this top 10 as it exists right now is full of quality, and with all the games that I just mentioned and many, many more, the future is bright for the Switch 2. And today or tomorrow, depending on when this uploads, we'll be getting a Nintendo Partner Direct, so maybe we'll have even more games to add to the list of potential games that will be in the top 10 moving forward. But that's just my top 10. What are your favourite games? And what are the titles that you most look forward to? Let me know in the comments. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and remember that you can find all the ways to listen, watch, and support the show. Thank you very much. Plus, join our free members area to win free official Nintendo prizes at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Thanks, everyone. And I hope you all enjoyed the Nintendo Partner Direct. I will see you there. I can't wait. Let's go. Woohoo!